Hey guys, welcome to Whiskey and Literature. I'm your host, Captain Mike, and tonight it's Man Down Monday. We're just going through the bottles that I've killed recently to let you know what I've been drinking to further my whiskey education when the camera is off. And do I prefer these bottles? Am I going to replace them? Or were they one and done? And I'm interested in what you've been drinking. What bottles have you killed recently? And are you going to replace them? All right, let's get it. And we're gonna start with the whiskey that I've drank more bottles of than any other whiskey. I've only been drinking totally in my life for about 5 years. I had my first whiskey in 2019 at 46 years old. And one of those first whiskeys was the High West Double Rye. It's from Utah. I lived in Utah for a long time, so a little bit of a connection there. It's very available in the West Coast, though. You know what? It's really available everywhere. High West has exploded big time, and the High West Double Rye is very affordable. It typically is the first rye that someone sees when they go to a store that has High West. It's almost always going to be the Double Rye and then their bourbon as well. Let's do a brief specs and stats of this whiskey. It's a blend of two ryes, MGP 95.5 rye and a High West 80.20 rye, and that 20% of the High West rye is malted rye. So it's 100% rye, 80% is not malted, 20% is. It just says it's at least 2 years old. It's bottled at 92 proof. MSRP is $39 or $37.99, though I oftentimes see it at a lower price, as I've seen it as low as $19.99 recently. This whiskey is youthful and it is aggressive, and I like it. It's bold, it's bright, it's balanced with a bit of spice and cinnamon, and perhaps a bit some mintiness in there. This is, to me, a great rye, especially at the price point. I've seen it, as low as $19.99 recently, and I'll always pick this up. And I have a backup for my backup of the Double Rye. I'm also a big fan of their finished Double Ryes, really a big fan of those. Those can run anywhere between $45 and $90 for the finished Double Ryes, but they've been great. And I know that High West is a relatively dynamic company. They've only been around for so long. They were bought by Constellation Brands in 2016 for $160 million. And so they've been putting out more and more product. And I know there's some quality people are saying about the whiskey keeps getting younger and younger, but I'm a fan of it. And the Double Rye, I think, is a great way to go, and it's great in a cocktail. I like to drink it neat, and however you like to drink your whiskey, the Double Rye will do it for you. Good stuff. Okay, the next two bottles, honestly, I was just trying to get rid of these bottles from my shelf, and let's go through them real quick. A few months ago, wanted to go through all of the shelf-stable Jim Beam products, if you will, and that would include the Devil's Cut. As far as I know, this is the typical Jim Beam mash bill, 77, 13, and 10, non-age stated, bottled at 90 proof. $19.99 is the MSRP for this bottle, and the best thing I can say about Devil's Cut from Jim Beam is to quote my friend John after he had his first pour of Devil Cuts, and he's been a lifelong Jim Beam drinker, though mostly the white label. After he had a sip of the Jim Beam Devil's Cut, he was like, "Excuse me for a minute while I pull the splinters out of my mouth." Honestly, I don't think there's any reason for you to buy the Devil's Cut. If you want some Jim Beam, and I'm a fan of Jim Beam and their products, and just buy their double oak or their extra aged. Same price and at least twice as good. Okay, my next bottle, let's see, and I cannot find the mash bill for this subscriber recommended Canadian American whiskey, Pendleton whiskey, true Western tradition. It is, I believe, non-age stated, bottled at 80 proof. MSRP is a nice low $22.99. I found this whiskey to be like most or a lot of the Canadian whiskeys that I try, so overly sweet. It's hard for me to enjoy it. So I'll say if you want to make your cocktails nice and sweet, and that's your flavor profile, and you like those Canadian whiskeys, then the Pendleton whiskey might be the whiskey for you. I just know that, like the Devil's Cut, this is a bottle I will not be replacing on my shelf. Now, I do have another Canadian that I'll be trying to pick up here soon. I've heard a couple recommendations on my channel for the Lot 40 Rye. So if you have any comments on that one, let me know. I'm probably gonna pick that one up here in the near future and give one more Canadian a try. Okay, my next bottle. That's so good. My next bottle was a gift to me from my good friend Kevin. This is Bardstown Bourbon Company. They purchased Green River a few years ago, and this is Green River's wheated bourbon. Mash bill is 70-21-9. It's at least 4 years old, bottled at 90 proof. MSRP is right around $35. And honestly, I was not sold on this whiskey the first couple pours that I had, and then I decided, you know, I'm just gonna power through it and get it off my shelf. And as I was really hitting it almost every night for a week or so, I grew to appreciate this nice, soft whiskey. It's sweet, it's soft, and it is agreeable. And I really, not enough to purchase another bottle of this, but I did appreciate this pour. And it had a nice little finish with some spice on it, which kind of sealed the deal for me. But again, I will not be replacing that bottle. Would you like to take a guess to how many bottles of Blanton's I have finished in my life? If you guessed anything more than one, you would be wrong. This is the first bottle of Blanton's I purchased, the first bottle that I opened, and the only bottle that I've opened, and the first bottle that I finished of a Blanton single barrel. And in Blanton's, the mash bill is undisclosed, non-age stated, and is bottled at 93 proof. This is a single barrel. This MSRP is $63. And the last 3 bottles that I purchased of this, I am lucky enough to have been at the distillery and gotten it at MSRP, and I feel pretty good about that. In full disclosure, how much did I pay for this bottle? I think, like a lot of people who buy their first bottle of Blanton's, I definitely overpaid for this. And I can't give you the exact number of what this bottle cost me because I purchased it in a bundle with 3 bottles of whiskey total. There was this Blanton's, there is a 1.75 liter of Sazerac Rye, and I can't even remember what that third bottle was. And I paid $299 for that little bundle. Again, I think, like a lot of people who buy their first bottle of Blanton's, I definitely overpaid, no question on that. I have made a commitment this year to not overpay for whiskey. I did recently overpay for a above MSRP for Woodford Reserve double oaked, but man, I really wanted that whiskey, and it wasn't a crazy amount over, so I'm kind of okay with that. And going back to the Blanton's, you can think what you want about the Blanton's, but I think at MSRP, this is a decent pour. I like the classic bourbon notes that I get from this bottle. It doesn't really wow me. It's not my go-to pour, but I'm always happy to have a pour for this. I think, well, I have 5 bottles at my house right now. 4 that are empty. And I think I would like to have a bottle or 2 of Blanton's at my house at all times. I've had a few pours of the other expressions, the straight from the barrel. But I'm not willing to pay the prices that I see still on the shelf for that. And I still see regular single barrel on the shelf regularly here in the Bay, and they're going off the shelf. People are buying these for $159. And I definitely do not think it's worth it at that price point, but I'm super happy to have it at $63. And I do think when I open my next bottle of Blanton's, I think I'm gonna open 2 bottles so I can compare and contrast the 2 single barrels, because I've heard that they've been really good through the years of keeping the Blanton's single barrels consistent in their flavor profile. So I think it'd be interesting to have two of them and see. Okay, another High West. And I think of all the High West products, the most divisive High West product is the Campfire. And I remember when I first picked up a bottle of this, it was so off profile. For what I expected from High West, I just couldn't even deal with it because I didn't want to drink it because it was just not what I wanted when I picked up a High West. The mash bill is a blend of a rye and a bourbon from MGP, that 80-20 rye from High West, and an undisclosed malt Scotch whiskey. This is bottled at 92 proof, and the MSRP is $79.99, and that's pretty much, if you go to Total Wine or the big places, that's the price I see for this. If you go to the smaller kind of corner stores, they usually have it closer to about $90. But for $79.99, I think it's really grown on me as I've drank more and more whiskey this year, the past year. I drank a lot more scotches and peated and smoky scotches, and I've grown to appreciate them. And as I've come back to the Campfire, and while I initially was put off by the profile, now I do really like it, and I have a backup for my backup of the Campfire. And I did ask myself at first initially, why the Campfire? Why didn't they use their High Country in this instead of an undisclosed blended malt Scotch whiskey? Because the triple mash is kind of like the Campfire, except it uses Jack Daniel's American single malt, whereas this uses a blended Scotch, a blended malt Scotch. But Campfire came out before High Country. So High Country wasn't a thing, so they couldn't have used it when they developed Campfire. And if they used an American single malt that's not smoky and peated, what can they really call a Campfire? Because it wouldn't have those same notes. And I think this is a great winter whiskey. It really just hits those right notes that you want to have on a cold, wintry Florida night. Okay, we're gonna finish up with a pour from a whiskey that has been one of my favorites since, well, I discovered it very early last year. I had actually bought a Woodford Reserve Double Oaked, and it sat on my shelf for probably 6 months. Then I went to a friend's house for his birthday, and that Woodford Reserve Double Oak has sat on my shelf for 6 months unopened. And when I went to this friend's house for his birthday, I bought a bottle of the Double Oaked. He opened it there at his house, and we shared some pours. And I was like, whoa, this is so great. I can't believe I have an open mine at my house. And I ran right home, well, from Colorado to Florida, ran right home and opened my Woodford Reserve Double Oaked. The mash bill is 72-18-10, non-age stated, bottled at the usual Woodford Reserve, 90.4 proof. MSRP is $55.99. I really fell in love with this whiskey initially with the nose. Caramel, cinnamon, and banana. I love it. It's a great looking whiskey. That Double Oak gives it a nice dark complexion. And this Woodford Reserve Double Oak has been one of my go-to pours for the past year. Wow, it is so good and rich, and I thought this was an amazing whiskey, and I still think so. But what I have come to realize in the past year is how many Double Oak bourbons are out there and how they are distinct, and they're all pretty good. And while I'll always have a place on my shelf for the Woodford Reserve Double Oak, it really does have some competition with some of the other Double Oaks that are out there. Okay guys, that's it. I do have some other bottles that are teetering on empty, but I'm just kind of nursing them because some of those, they just cannot be replaced. And I don't save bottles, so these will be going to the recycle bin in just a couple of days. And it has been a crazy crazy year and a half for me. And as I've begun and really got into drinking more and more different whiskeys, this is a great example of the things that roll through my shelf. Some of these are old friends, like the High West and the Woodford Reserve is kind of a new friend, and these have earned places on my shelves. And then we have some other whiskeys that roll through, whether things I'm just trying out, they were gifts, or they were recommendation for me, that have not earned and will not be replaced on my shelf at all. And on that note, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you're reading something good and drinking something great. Turn to the pages, my friends, and stay thirsty. Cheers.